Hi everyone. Thank you, Sapien. Shailee to come online. Oh. Hi, Shailee.
Hi Sangeeta, can you hear me?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
Hi.
great. Good morning. Thank you for joining us at what 8:30 a.m. from Canada.
Yes, it is 8:30 here, and good evening to you.
Thank you very much. So we're just going to give it maybe a couple of more minutes just to let people join, and then we'll start.
Sure.
But yeah, I think we're all really excited to finally have this conversation because we've been waiting a while to do this.
I'm excited to talk about my book in a space where people are here to listen to me talk about my book, because otherwise I keep on doing it and maybe people are not always interested. So yes, thank you for having me.
No, not at all. I think it's a beautiful book. Just a sneak peek for all the early comers. I'm sure like all of you already know the book, but still I'm really excited to, have this conversation with you and really kind of get into, your headspace and process of writing this and creating this with the team. So yeah, I guess we can kind of get started now, and people will join in. We'll start the introductions and get into it. So first off, hi everyone, welcome to Book Talk. We have Shailee with us, and we're talking about a very special book today, the latest from Tulika Graphix, which is My Story, My Voice, Sita and Helen. So before getting into that, yes, Sita and Helen. So before that, a little bit about our author, Shailee. So Shailee is originally from Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and she is currently doing her master's thesis on queer representation in post-colonial theatre at McGill University. You can find her pieces, like she's written for the Bombay Review, Live Wire, Montreal Sarai, and a couple of other places. She's also developing a musical on Indian myths and folklore. And yes, this is her first book, which is a graphic novel, which I think we at Tulika are very proud and happy to be a part of. My Story, My Voice, Sita, and Helen. So welcome, Shailee. It is so good to finally have you here and have this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Sangeeta, and thank you for the great introduction.
No, not at all. So just a quick, note for everyone watching. So we will be getting into the Q&A right now. And towards the end, if you guys have any comments or questions you'd like to ask Shailee about the book or anything, please feel free and go ahead and ask us. And we'll try to take as many as we can as time permits. So yeah, I think first things first, Sita and Helen, two iconic women from mythology. I think almost everyone, even if not Helen of Troy, who's still very well known, but especially in India, Sita from the Ramayana is someone who's very well known, and almost every household here, I think that is a story you inevitably end up hearing. So what inspired you to write this book, and why was this important for you to put out into the world?
I think I have a very evolving answer to this question, because if about a year ago you had asked me this question, I would have said that my motivation is to get a good grade on a seminar. So, as you said, I am at McGill University and I just submitted my master's thesis on Indian theatre. And last year, I had the opportunity of being part of a seminar at McGill, which prompted us as academic scholars, as scholars, to translate our knowledge into something which is accessible by the public in a language, in a space which is mainstream. because, researchers have a very bad reputation of talking in a language that people just cannot understand.
Okay.
So even if you're talking sense, it just doesn't translate. Also, it gets published in spaces that people do not usually read. Like, nobody is going to open a journal and read a paper on Indian theater. So this program sort of encouraged us to come up with projects where we could translate our knowledge into something which was public facing. As part of my final assignment, I wrote this book, right? This book on Sita and Helen. Uh, so yeah, that was my first motivation. But then once I got into the publishing process with Tulika, I realized a lot of things about myself. Publishing as a creative process is such a self-reflexive journey. It makes you realize so many things about yourself. It brought up so many forgotten memories from my childhood. I'll take you down a tour on my memory lane, and I'll tell you something about what I realized through this process. So when I was around 7 or 8 years old, I was part of this book club. It was called Reading Rainbow.
Okay.
It was in Ahmedabad, and it was led by a woman called Dr. Atula Ahuja, and I owe so much to her. So as part of this book club, a bunch of kids, we got together during different times of the week, and we used to read books, and we used to create limericks together, and we used to read poetry. We used to have these showcases where we used to play act certain dramas, just that kind of an environment. It was as part of this book club that I once got an opportunity to meet Anant Pai, who's the editor of Amar Chitra Kathas.
Yeah.
And I have a very vague memory of this, right? Because it was when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I hardly remember anything about the event, but I remember calling him Uncle Pai. Yes. And I remember being very excited, because it was a storytelling session. So I knew that he would be reading from one of the Amar Chitra Kathas. Now, I was obsessed with Amar Chitra Kathas, right? Because they were such beautifully illustrated books of Indian myths. And yeah, the first book that I owned was an Amar Chitra Katha, which was about Krishna's life. And it was this collection of different events from Krishna's life. And I remember taking it to Uncle Pai and getting it signed from him. And I'm sure I have a copy somewhere right now. So, looking back, I feel Amar Chitra Kathas was my introduction to not only the world of Indian myths, but also my love for literature, because I remember poring over these illustrated graphic novels for hours at a time, and my mom pushing me to go outside and play, and me just refusing to do that because, I'm in the middle of a book.
Yeah.
And, this dream, like this love for literature has converted into a career choice right now. But I feel Reading Rainbow, being part of this book club, was a huge source of inspiration behind this book. And, it has been a dream come true, because I remember reading Ikki Dukki at Reading Rainbow, Ikki Dukki, which is a Tulika publication, if I'm correct, by Sandhya Rao, right? And I remember reading it as a kid. And now I'm being published by Tulika, who's also the publisher of Sandhya Rao's book. So, dreams do come true, I guess.
Yes, and I think this is a wonderful dream that's come true. But, having said that, like you said, you read Amar Chitra Katha, which was obviously an introduction to mythology, but there are so many more versions of, Sita and Helen today. There's a lot more literature, there's a lot more theories and whatnot. What prompted you to sort of put out your version, of these iconic women, and especially as a graphic novel?
So I'll tell you first about how I settled upon Sita and Helen's myth. As a scholar, I keep on reading about how myths are such an integral part of the cultural canon of a society, right? Because they reflect, it is a divine or a supernatural framework, but it also reflects the reality of a society at a particular point of time. Its popularity denotes the deficiencies or the needs or the negative and positive attributes of a society. So as a scholar, I knew about all this. And as a theater scholar, my first instinct for my final assignment was to write a play. And when I sat down to write this, a lot of names from Greek and Indian mythology popped up in my head. So, off the top of my head, I knew that I could write about Sati, I could write about Kunti, I could write about Draupadi. But at the same time, I also knew about Persephone and Medusa and Cassandra. And for me, all these women were related because I associated them with tragedy in some form of another. You know, these are women who had been exploited or silenced or oppressed. They lacked voice and agency. So when I sat down to write this play about mythological women, the first scene that sort of popped up into my head was a stage which was divided down the middle into two different cultural contexts, the Indian and the Greek. And this one conversation which flowed across the stage, sort of crossing boundaries, cultural, temporal, and spatial boundaries. And it was a conversation between Sita and Helen and their respective families, both of them arguing about how they did not want to get married to strange men that they had just met. So, you know, both these women, their marriages are such an important defining moment in their lives because their weddings are decided by people other than themselves, right? They are decided by third parties, their families or their fathers, or the courts. They are decided to strange men that they have never met in life. And the mode of deciding is also a competition where men show a certain valor, a certain strength. So now in my head, I could imagine this conversation where both Sita and Helen were raising their voices and sort of putting forward their arguments about how they did not want to get married. And this conversation was such a bridge for me, you know, across cultures and all. So even before I knew that it was supposed to be a graphic novel, I knew that I had to write this scene between Sita and Helen. So, you know, though the abduction of both these women is such a defining moment in popular imagination, this particular narrative is built around this conversation. I'll quickly show you the spread that Priyadarshini has illustrated.
Yes, we have to give a shout out to Priyadarshini Banerjee, who has illustrated this beautiful book for sure.
What a beautiful imagination. I must say, she brought my vision to life so beautifully beyond what I had expected. And I think the spread is a great example. Like you can see Sita over here, Helen over here, both of them having a single conversation which flows across the pages, you know. So sort of bringing this forward that even though they are separated across culture, they are separated across time, they are still in the same position. Their circumstances are so similar. So this is why I decided on myths, and Sita and Helen in particular. As far as graphic novel goes, as I said, initially my idea was to go ahead and write a play because I'm a theatre scholar, and I thought the most easy thing for me to do would be to just write a play. But then a play is only as impactful as its performance, I believe. And for my final assignment, I wanted to find a more efficient and immediate manner to sort of convey my entire vision on paper. So I realized that a graphic novel would be a better choice. And it just made sense to combine text with visuals to engage a very young audience. And you know, the popularity of comics and graphic novels in the market today, there's an abundance of them, from DC and Marvel to Japanese manga. And I think that says a lot about why these graphic novels and these formats are so necessary and have so much literary value, you know. Like last year, I'll give you an example from my life. I was teaching an undergraduate course on philosophy. And I had to sort of convey a lot of difficult concepts, such as philosophical concepts, such as absurdism or pacifism. And I remember taking the Naruto manga to class and using Naruto characters to, you know, convey these ideas, because even though it's a children's tale, it conveys the gist of these ideological stances in such an easy format, you know. So I refuse to accept that comics or graphic novels are inferior in any way, which is, you know, a very popular perception. And I was very inspired, even while I've been studying literature, I've been very inspired by other illustrated novels such as Bimayana, which recounts the life of Dr. Ambedkar in a visual format, or say Persepolis, which is a narration of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So, you know, these are all illustrated formats, and yet they have so much political and culturally destabilizing potential. You know, they have it has a very rebellious spirit which allows you to question stereotypes and raise questions. And I wanted to bring that to my narrative, you know, question our society, question the patriarchal restraints which are so deeply embedded that we don't even recognize them anymore. And yeah, I think the graphic novel format has served me really well for this particular narrative.
Yeah, but coming to that, obviously you saw this as a play first, right? And then realized that, oh, this could work well as a graphic novel. So then how does that then, what does your process become? Because obviously when you're writing a novel, it's just text, 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 and you edit it down. But when it's a graphic novel, it's a completely different process on working on the text altogether. So, how different would you say it is to work on a graphic novel as opposed to, like, say, a normal, like, textual chapter novel?
Right. I haven't really written a novel, so I don't know how I might be able to compare it to that. Hopefully, I'll have the experience one
I mean,
day
you don't
so that I can
the
give you
master's thesis.
But I did end up writing the play.
Yeah.
The play that we talked about, the musical, I borrowed a lot of elements from the Helen and Sita narrative and I converted it into a musical play. And it borrows a lot of elements from like metrical Sanskrit classical theater, the chorus from Greek theater, and it was a completely different journey. But as far as writing the graphic novel goes, it was not only a different medium. For me, the most difficult challenge I would say was, to portray the theme and the language in a particular way for a very young audience.
Yeah.
As a scholar, I have generally addressed an audience which is adult, which is above 18. For me, addressing a very impressionable young audience was the main challenge because the lives of both Sita and Helen are defined by a lot of violent themes. There's a lot of exploitation, there's a lot of oppression. And for me, the most important thing was to portray this in a truthful manner, to not be so false, to paint a full picture of what was going on, but at the same time be sensitive to the younger age of the reader that I'm targeting, and to know that they are very impressionable. So, I had these wonderful conversations with Dia, who was my editor, about the smallest word, about the smallest phrase, the language I'm using to, just make sure that we are doing something right in a novel which is meant for children. And of course, the medium itself was a little difficult to write for me because as a researcher, I have this tendency to go into a lot of details, to expound generously upon everything. And of course, this is not how it works in creative writing, especially in a graphic novel where the text goes along with the visuals, right? It's a combined narrative, they go hand in hand. So for me, I had to realize that the process of creating writing was much more nuanced. It had to be more subtle. It had to be way more concise because of the space restrictions. There was one spread, and I only had this much space to convey whatever I had to. The rest I had to leave up to the illustrator and the illustrations to convey, right? So it was a huge process of unlearning a lot of things I knew about writing and relearning them in a creative graphic novel format. I realized that the text, a lot of things were just unsaid and it was subtext. And I didn't have to hold their hands and lead them through the narrative. I just needed to make sure that I'm conveying the message. And I think Priyadarshini's imagination, the way she has, imagined each and every conversation, it brings so much life to the text. The text itself, it reaches its full potential because of the illustrations, and I owe so much to her as well, and kudos to her because it's her first book as well.
It is her first book as well, and she's an in-house designer with us at Tulika, and it's amazing to have watched her work on this as well, along with you. And on that note, actually, I think we should show them some spreads. I'm going to show you some of my favorite spreads. So this is obviously the iconic Sita Swayamvar when Ram breaks the bow, which I think everyone knows this from the Ramayana. I think this is such a lovely spread. And one of Priyadarshini's favorite spreads, I was just talking to her today about this, and she was talking about one of Helen's spreads, which is the tapestry when the battle of the siege of Troy is happening, and Helen is sort of weaving the history of it into it, which is again a very beautiful spread. So yeah, I mean, kudos to her, but kudos to you as well for obviously putting this version, of these two iconic women, and honestly kind of trying to give them a voice and narrative and trying to look at things from their perspective, which is not an easy thing to do. But having said that, something I'm super curious about is that, obviously when you talk about women like this in mythology, and you essentially, like you said, it's usually more for an adult audience. But here, this is a graphic novel for children for like 10 years and above. So then how do you then decide that, okay, I want to do this for children, and how do you go about it? Because essentially you could have pitched this as an adult book, but you chose to do it for children. Why did you choose to do that?
I think the answer would be that I like to challenge myself a lot, So just I knew that a children addressing a younger audience or a younger readership would be very difficult for me, because I just
Yes.
have a tendency to write in long sentences and convey a lot of ideas within that one sentence. So yeah, I just wanted to give myself this challenge and see how I go about it. But while I was writing the narrative, I realized that there's a lot that I had to set which I could not in a children's book. So instead, I focused on picking out the similarities between both the tales, just picking out the certain defining moments where I could compare, where I could show children that, oh, it's a simultaneous plot line and there are so many interwoven circumstances which lead to this particular fate. Yeah, and it has been fun writing about, writing for children, because I remember being so impressed by Enid Blyton when I was
Yeah.
younger, and reading all the famous five and the Secret Seven novels and being so engrossed in the world that she creates that I had a tendency to forget about my own realities, and I just hope that I have been able to do something similar, while at the same time giving children access to this alternate perspective, a
Yeah.
perspective which allows them to see how patriarchy is still such an essential part of a society. And even though we don't recognize it in our daily lives, it has consequences. It functions and it affects your mothers, your friends, your sisters. And I hope they can draw this connection between women from myths and the women that they see around themselves, So just this recognition. And of course, I hope it gives them a language and a lens to make sense of their own world, because myths themselves are such an integral part of oral storytelling traditions in our land, right? And I'm pretty sure almost all of us have heard tales of the Jataka
Yeah.
stories or the Panchatantra stories from our grandparents or parents. And at a young age, these are the stories which taught me about the moralities of life, about
Yeah.
ethics, about how to conduct myself, about what was right and wrong. So, myths and oral storytelling traditions have such a deep impact on the formative years of development of a child's life,
Yeah.
And I wish to draw this out for children at a very young age. And I must say, one of the reviews that a young reader left for me, and I think which Tulika also reshared on their Instagram page, uh, I think it is doing what it's supposed to do, because the little reader wrote about how she hates having her cheeks pulled by random people, by strangers. And
Yeah.
I love that she's able to understand that, her choice matters.
Yeah.
She deserves to be heard, and if she does not like something, if she does not like somebody infringing on her physical space, then she gets the right to say no and let it be heard. She has that agency, she has that voice. So I'm just glad that, and I hope it keeps on conveying the message that I want.
Yes. And I think it is doing that, because even I remember this review that you're talking about. I think the girl's name's Harnoor. Priyadarshini just mentioned it in the comments. So we all remember when at the Tulika office, seeing this and being like, oh my God, this is amazing, to see like kids responding to this story in this way. So yeah, I mean, baby steps. I think it's a ripple effect, and let's hope that it keeps going. But yeah, another interesting thing, what I figured, from your profile, and it's there in your bio in the book as well, you mentioned that you'd like to teach a course on graphic novels and
Right.
comics, on young adult graphic novels. So, why do you believe that these formats of storytelling are important? And, why is it something that you're so interested in sort of teaching and kind of getting more people to be aware of?
Right. I think it's just, the fact that I have had access to such great graphic novels and comics throughout my life, and they have left such a huge impression on me, whether it be Japanese manga, or whether it's graphic novels such as Bimayana and Persepolis, I feel they have a very politically destabilizing potential. They have this ability to question a lot of things. And yeah, I just feel that teaching it in a literature class allows children to see how literature has such an integral place in our society today, to question what is going on around them, but also to make sense of why it is wrong and why it is right.
Yeah.
And I think graphic novels, by combining the text with the visuals, does it in a very impactful way, in a very engaging manner, conveying such complex idea in a very understandable and simplistic format. And I really value that, because as a scholar who's trying to do this public facing project and convert her knowledge into something which is accessible, I think graphic novels are inherently built to do that, convey that kind of idea simplistically. So yeah, I think that is why they carry such great literary value, and which is why I hope one day I get to teach this in a classroom in university.
Hopefully, maybe one day we'll again be sitting here when you've done another book with Tulika and you're probably teaching at a university. Who knows? Let's just manifest it and put it out in the universe. So before we move into audience Q&A, if anyone has to say anything, what are you hoping for readers to take from Sita and Helen?
Of course, I wish that, I hope it acts as a pedagogical tool. It acts as an education tool to bring forward how patriarchy restrains women, and the kind of just how how women still lack agency and voice in so many aspects of their life. And I hope it provides them a lens to make sense of their world, to make meaning of their realities. And I think it's so essential to do it in the right manner. And I believe parents today are very concerned about making sure that their children are reading the right kind of literature. And I hope I can understand that parental point of view and contribute to that need, contribute to the need of literature, which is Indian, because a lot of children's literature has also been produced abroad, and it engages with themes which are very foreign to our Indian context. So of course, I hope to draw out the Indian context and the nuances and the specificities of the Indian experience, draw such cultural connections with societies which existed in a different time or in a different space. Because I also believe that, boundaries of separation and prejudices occur at a very young age because of just perceived differences based on ignorance. And if I can combat this kind of ignorance and lead to this awareness that in the end we are all similar, that we are tied together through these experiences, yeah, maybe I'm just looking for and hoping for this one girl who one day reads this book and is like, oh, so princesses like these also had a say. This is what they thought about their own life, and this is what they wanted to do, and apply it to her own life. I think I'm just glad if there's even one reader who gets to say this.
Yeah, and I think hopefully, yeah, with time we will see more readers like this coming out. But yeah, now we're kind of opening it out to audience questions, comments. So if you guys in the audience have anything you'd like to ask Shailee about the book, please go ahead. Or if you've already read the book and you have any thoughts, please do let us know. We'd be happy to read it and kind of take maybe 2 or 3 questions or comments maybe. So yeah.
Before we take questions, I'd just like to point out another thing. The fact that I'm so grateful that I worked with Tulika for my first publishing experience, because it was also a team of all women artists working together and collaborating together on a narrative which sought to bring to center stage the voices of marginalized women. And I think the process itself was such an eye-opening, enlightening experience for me, because there was so much sensitivity from all sides. There was so much patience. And you pointed out that particular scene that is Priyadarshini's favorite, the one with Helen's tapestry. And I remember having at least 4 conversations about the tapestry itself, because, there were concerns such as Hellenic Greek, the time period when Helen is supposed to have existed. Did they even have stitching and weaving at that time? And I remember researching in such depth and detail, all these academic papers which analyzed cloth making skills in ancient Greece. So, there was just such an attention to detail. There was so much empathy. And yeah, I'm just truly grateful to Tulika and the entire team for allowing me this great experience.
And thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful book. I know the editorial team really enjoyed working on the book. Of course, shout out to our senior editor, Dia, who is a major part of this. And of course, our other editors, Priya, Bhavna, Radhika Menon, of course, the mind and the soul, I think, behind Tulika Publishers. And of course, Priyadashni Banerjee, our illustrator, who I think has truly been an integral part of this book for sure. But thank you so much for trusting us with your story and coming to us with your story as well. I think this has been such a beautiful collaboration, and hopefully here's to many more wonderful stories. But yeah, moving on to audience questions, I saw one from Saurabh. So he says, this book was great. Do you have any other books or ideas in the works?
That is, oh my God, I feel so much pressure every time somebody asks me that question. Not as of right now. I was in the middle of a lot of academic writing. As I just said, I submitted my thesis right now. And when you're working on such an intensely academic project, it just becomes very difficult to think on a creative tangent. Hopefully, now that I'm done with my master's degree and I have some time on my hands, I will be able to come up with an idea and have the time and space to make it a reality.
Fingers crossed to more amazing stories from your side. And Priyadashni Banerjee is with us in the comments here today, and she has a question for you, Shailee. She wants to ask you, which is your favorite and most graphically impactful spread in the book, and why is it according to you?
My favorite and most
Yeah.
the spread. Priyadarshini, first of all, I love the entire design, the illustrations. Please don't make me pick out one. But if I have to say, I think for me the most impactful spread was the last one. I know it's this one.
Yeah.
Because the entire story is about two women, Sita and Helen, but the framework, the things which starts it and the thing which ends it, is this particular illustration where the women have passed on from the mortal plane, and they're sort of, this is the first time somebody is asking them these questions about their life, and they are recounting it because nobody has ever asked them this. And towards the end, there's this sense of vindication, that no matter how their lives went, there was somebody who heard their story, who heard their side. And I think there's such a lot of potential in that one scene for girls to be able to relate to it, because it's not two women at this point, it's just one woman. And I hope this conveys to them that anybody can be this woman, every woman needs this space to be heard. Yeah, so for me, the last spread and the first spreads were the most impactful, because then it becomes the story of the generic every woman who exists at any point in time in any culture.
As very well said. It's beautifully put across. And I think it is important to have more narratives, right, around women and their voices as well. So I think this book is a step towards doing that for sure. So maybe we can take like one last comment or question. So if anyone has anything, please do let us know in the comments. Maybe we can wait for a minute to see if anyone has anything to say. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Just scrolling up to see if I've missed anything.
This is the first time I'm doing Instagram Live, and I must say this has been so much fun, Sangeeta. Thank you thank you for being a great moderator.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy you're having fun. Oh, there's a comment actually by someone called Raja KDR, which is much before. So he's basically said, addressing children means you are targeting adults of tomorrow, that is future society. It is an excellent future form of thinking. Thank you, Raja KDR. It most definitely is. So, okay, I think we're pretty much done. So thank you so much, Shailee, for being here. Before wrapping up, again, please pick up this beautiful graphic novel. And it's an important narrative. It is beautiful, but the story is also an important one. Sita from the Ramayana, and of course Helen of Troy. It's about both these women, their voices. So please do pick it up. It's an important story for our times, and I think for kids also to read. Also, our Tulika Graphix books are on discount at the moment. They're on sale. So you can get them at 25% off till June 12th. So you can grab this and the other books we have in the Tulika Graphix imprint. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Shailee, for being so wonderful to talk to and, just have this conversation with.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sangeeta.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.